Hello, my name is Mark, and today we're going to be going over the Reading Comprehension for the IBEW Aptitude tests. This is practice passage number 2. Make sure you like this video because all this is free, and I'm going to make sure it is always free.
Until I die.
Subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed, and also check out my whole playlist of all my videos for the IBEW. And lastly, make sure you check out my gaming stuff because your boy plays games on this channel. This channel is education and gaming. All right, let's begin. You will have 51 minutes to complete 36 questions. That's about a minute and some change to complete each question. That includes reading the passages too, so you have less time. There's no penalty for guessing, and there's no public information to how many passages are on the official test. However, from feedback that I've gotten, there are 4 to 5 passages. If there are 4 passages, that probably means that there's 9 questions each, because there's 36 questions. The goal is to practice how to attack any passage they put in front of you. And all this information I'm providing you is for educational purposes only. This is all unofficial. How I'm going to attack the passages is how I will attack the passages. These are the types of reading comprehension questions. You have the main idea, author's primary purpose, passage organization, inference, and broader implication. Go ahead and pause the video and take a screenshot of this. I want to note that the questions will not follow this order. They will be mixed, as you will see in this practice passage. Now let's move on to the passage. What I am going to do is I am going to read the passage out loud, because I want you to see or to hear how I read. And this is the way I want you to read when you see the passages. I want you to slow it down. That's number 1. Slow everything down and read with a purpose. Ask yourself who, what, where, when, and why when you are reading the passage. I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong if you have already taken the test, I do not believe that you will be able to annotate, right? Mark up the passage on the computer. I thought you did. I'm thinking in my head that I did when I took the test, but I'm not sure. I did a quick check on Google and I wasn't able to find anything concrete that you are able to annotate the passage. So I'm going to say this, that you will not be able to annotate and you will have to take mental annotation. And that's where you will have to ask yourself who, what, where, when, why when reading the passage. The hidden message behind the jingle. For many people in California, Cars for Kids was familiar less as a charity than as a sound. Its advertisements built around a short and memorable jingle aired for years on radio and television, asking listeners to donate unwanted vehicles. The message was simple: call a phone number, give away a car, and help children. That simplicity was part of the campaign's strength. A person did not need to read a long brochure or examine financial records to understand the basic request. Yet that simple simplicity eventually became the center of a legal dispute. In 2026, a California Superior Court judge in Orange County ruled that the charity's existing advertisements could no longer air in the state in their current form because they created a misleading impression about who benefited from the donations. The case began with a donor who said he gave a non-working car after hearing the charity's advertisements and believing that the proceeds would help underprivileged children broadly, including children in California. His donation was not financially large, but the court treated the issue as larger than the value of a single vehicle. At stake was what a reasonable donor would understand after repeatedly hearing an advertisement that used children, a memorable phone number, and a general appeal to charity. The donor argued that the advertisement led him to believe the organization's mission was broader and more local than it was. After learning that much of the money was directed to a related nonprofit with a more specific religious and geographic focus, he claimed that the advertisement had left out information he would have considered important before donating. The legal problem centered on the idea of an omission. In ordinary conversation, a misleading statement is often thought of as something false that someone says directly. But an advertisement can also be misled by leaving out a fact that changes how the rest of the message is understood. An omission is not merely the absence of extra detail. In a legal or consumer protection setting, an omission can matter when the missing information is significant enough that a reasonable person might make a different decision if the information were included. In this case, the court focused on whether the advertisements made donors think their contributions would support needy children generally, while failing to clearly disclose that the funds were primarily connected to programs serving a more specific religious community and locations outside of California. This distinction was important because the charity did not operate as a typical local children's charity, even though some donors may have understood the advertisements that way. Evidence presented in the case described Cars for Kids as a vehicle donation organization that sent a large portion of its proceeds to URA, a related nonprofit associated with Jewish educational and youth programs. Some of those programs were based in New York and New Jersey, and some funding was connected to activities in Israel. The court did not rule that a religious charity was improper or that donors could not support those programs. Instead, the court focused on the difference between a lawful charitable mission and the way that mission was presented to the public. A charity may have the right to serve a specific community, but if its advertisements suggest a broader purpose, donors may be deprived of the information needed to choose knowingly. Cars for Kids disputed the ruling and argued that its identity and mission were available to anyone who looked beyond the advertisement itself. The organization stated that its website made clear that it was a Jewish organization, and it criticized the lawsuit as an attempt to divert charitable funds through litigation. From the charity's perspective, a short advertisement could not be expected to explain every part of its organizational structure, funding relationships, or program history. Many advertisements rely on simple appeals, and charities often use emotional images or memorable phrases to encourage donations. Cars for Kids maintained that the law and the facts supported its position and indicated that it expected to challenge the ruling on appeal. The court, however, placed special weight on the advertisement's primary call to action. The central instruction in the campaign was not to visit a website, read a detailed disclosure, and then decide whether to donate. It was to remember the phone number and call. Because the advertisement pushed donors toward a quick action, the court reasoned that the important information could not be hidden in a separate location that many donors might never visit. A website disclosure may provide useful background, but it does not automatically cure a misleading broadcast advertisement if the broadcast itself creates a different impression. In other words, the court was not only asking whether the information existed somewhere, it was asking whether the advertisement delivered enough information at the moment the donor was being persuaded to act. The judge issued an injunction, which is a court order requiring a person or organization to do something or stop doing something. In this case, the injunction required Cars for Kids to stop airing the non-compliant advertisements in California after a short transition period. Future advertisements in the state would need to provide clear, audible disclosures about the charity's religious affiliation, the geographic focus of the programs funded, and the age range of the people served. The order also addressed the use of very young children in the advertisements, since the court found that such images could strengthen the impression that donations primarily benefited young children in need. The ruling did not ban all possible advertising by the charity forever. It limited the current form of the ads and required future versions to communicate more precisely. The case also raised a broader issue about competition among charities. Charitable organizations do not compete in the same way that ordinary businesses do, but they do compete for public attention, trust, and limited donor dollars. If one charity uses a vague or emotionally powerful message that hides important limits on its mission, it may attract donations that would otherwise go to organizations whose work is stated more clearly. From this viewpoint, transparency is not only a matter of protecting one donor from confusion. It also helps preserve fairness in the larger charity marketplace. A local organization that openly says it serves children in one city may be disadvantaged if another group uses a broad appeal while failing to explain that its work is concentrated elsewhere. At the same time, the case shows why reading carefully matters. A donor who hears a short advertisement may assume that familiar words, cheerful images, and a simple slogan tell the whole story. But an advertisement is designed to persuade, not to summarize every relevant fact. The most important information may be found not in what is emphasized, but in what is left unstated. For that reason, the ruling became more than a dispute over one jingle. It became a lesson in how public messages can shape belief through implication. A statement can be technically brief, emotionally effective, and still incomplete in a way that matters. The central lesson is not that all charity advertising is deceptive or that donors should distrust every simple message. Rather, the case illustrates a narrower and more useful principle. When money is being requested for a cause, clarity matters. Donors need enough information to understand who is being helped, where the help is going, and whether the advertisement's impression matches the organization's actual work. If those pieces are missing, the problem may not be a direct lie. It may be an omission that materially changes how a reasonable donor understands the advertisement. End passage. I had a little bit of trouble reading some words, but I corrected myself. You will be able to cycle through the passage while doing the questions, while working on the questions. That is how the test works. So let's go ahead and go on to question number 1. According to the passage, an omission can make an advertisement misleading when it uses a short and memorable jingle to encourage donations, leaves out a fact that changes how the rest of the message is understood, gives donors too much information before asking them to act, and makes a charity sound less emotional than other organizations. All right, so this is a concept in context question. And what that means is we're going to be looking at the word omission. That is the key word here. And we're going to go back to the passage and see how, 1, the definition of omission, and number 2, how the word is being used. And the definition of omission is in here. It's not word, or it is word for word in here, but it doesn't say like omission is this. It tells us clues of what omission is. And the clues that I would pick on or pick up are missing information, misled by leaving out a fact that changes how the rest of the message is understood. And there you have it. It's actually word for word in the passage. So given that, we could choose B. And if we look at A, C, and D, right, let's just quickly go over this. The legal problem centered on the idea of an omission. In ordinary conversation, a misleading statement is often thought of as something false that someone says directly. But an advertisement can also be misled by leaving out a fact that changes how the rest of the message is understood. An omission is not merely the absence of extra detail. In a legal or consumer protection setting, an omission can matter when the missing information is significant enough that a reasonable person might make a different decision if the information were included. Now, just reading that, is there any of this, right? Any of A, C, or D in that paragraph that I just read, or just half the paragraph I just read? And the answer is no. And that just leaves us with B, which is word for word on the test. And again, you will not be able to annotate the test. I'm going to assume you will not be able to annotate the test. So I'm not going to do that. I will do stuff like this though. I believe you could do that, but you won't be able to do, for example, let's see. It says here, leaves out a fact. You won't be able to do this. Right here. You won't be able to do this. Highlight. I don't believe you will be able to do this. So I'm just going to undo that. Question 1 complete, and let's just go ahead to the answer, and that is B. Correct. So take a screenshot of this and work on it on your own. Question number 2. According to the passage, the California Superior Court judge ruled that Cars for Kids existing advertisements could no longer air in California in their current form because they failed to include the charity's phone number clearly enough. And I'm going to go through this and just go through my thought process right now. Failed to include the charity's phone number clearly enough. So they actually did provide their phone number, and it's right there in front of your face in the advertisement. Encourage people to donate vehicles that no longer worked. They did encourage people to donate vehicles, but this part right here, vehicles that no longer worked, I'm sure they wanted people to do that, but this doesn't have anything to do with the beginning part right here of advertisements could no longer air in California in their current form, right? This has nothing to do with what the passage is asking. And then we have created a misleading impression about who benefited from the donations. I believe this is the answer, and we'll just go back to that. Ask donors to read financial records before deciding whether to donate. And this is definitely not the answer. If I were asking for donations, I wouldn't even include for you to read financial records. And I don't expect, or I would not expect donors to read them. So we could rule that answer out. So before we make this assumption that C is the correct answer, let's just go ahead to the part where we did mention, or the passage mentioned this part. I believe, let's just go ahead. Okay. In 2026, a California Superior Court judge in Orange County ruled that the charity's existing advertisements could no longer air in the state in their current form. This is word for word because they, and this is word for word, created a misleading impression about who benefited from the donations. And the correct answer, word for word, is C. And guys, I do want to say that most of the answers will be word for word in the passage. So all you have to do is search for it. Yes, you have to search for it, but also you need to annotate in your mind, mentally annotate what you are reading. Because you would probably be cycling through the passage trying to find this answer if you didn't mentally note that it was here in the beginning, right? So practice that while you are reading. Grab a book and just annotate it yourself. Actually write in the book so you could do it mentally when you are taking the test. That's a way to prepare for it. Man, my back hurts from like carrying you guys with all this free test prep. I'm just kidding. Before we move on, did I mention that this question is a direct detail question? The question is asking for information that is clearly stated in the passage. And yes, it is C. All right, question number 3. The passage suggests that, in the court's view, a website disclosure was not enough because most donors were unable to access the charity's website. This is partly true, but this is not enough for me to say that this is the correct answer. The charity's website contained no information about its mission. No, if you do remember it, they did write the charity's mission on the website, but they didn't expect donors to read the mission. The main point of the advertisement was just to watch it, to call the number, then donate your car. And let's go on to C. The advertisement pushed donors toward a quick action before delivering enough important information. This sounds right here. Okay? And then we have, the court believed charities should never use websites to explain their programs. And this is false. That just sounds false. So given our answer choices, I would rule out B, okay, because they did have their mission on the website. I would get rid of D because that just sounds absurd. And then I would keep A and C. And C sounds like the choice that I would choose, but let's go ahead and disprove A. And it says here, most donors were unable to access the charity's website. And actually, just rereading it, the donors had access to the charity's website. So this is false because it says here, unable to access. And they were able to access. Okay, and that just leaves us with C. And let's just go ahead and see here in the passage where it is, because I do believe it is word for word in the passage. Website's disclosure. Okay, it's right here. The court, however, placed special weight on the advertisement's primary call to action. The central instruction in the campaign was not to visit a website, read a detailed disclosure, and then decide whether to donate. It was to remember the phone number and call. Because the advertisement pushed donors toward a quick action, the court reasoned that important information could not be hidden in a separate location that many donors might never visit. It's implied here that they did have access to the website. Okay. And it also is implied that there is information about the mission on the website. It's just that their call to action was very clear, and it was to push donors to call or to remember the phone number and then call. So right here, that gives us C. So this is an inference question, and the question is asking, what reasonable conclusion can I make based on what the passage says? So this isn't going to be word for word, but just going towards the section, you could make educated guess, or you will have information, enough information to make a conclusion. And in this case, we have plenty of information from this part of the passage to answer this question. So that gives us with C, and I'm going to go with C. And yes, C is the correct answer. Question number 4. Which statement best expresses the central lesson of the passage? This is a main idea question. So the question is asking, what is the biggest lesson or central point of the whole message? And we're looking for one, the mission or the lesson of the whole passage. And it's going to be a topic that is going to appear several times in the passage, right? So let's just go ahead and read the answer choices. Charity ads should be judged only by the information available on an organization's website. And that sounds wrong. When money is being requested for a cause, clarity matters. This sounds like the right answer because one, Cars for Kids is requesting money. And the problem here was that Cars for Kids omitted information that would have probably swayed donors to not donate their money. So let's go ahead and go on to C. All charity advertising is deceptive when it uses emotional images. Okay. And this is just one part of the passage. I believe it is true, but this is not the central lesson. That's just a bullet point. Cars for Kids was permanently banned from advertising in every state. And no, they weren't. They were only banned from advertising in California. And I wouldn't even say they were banned. They just had to take out their advertising. They were pulled from airing on television and radio. So given our answer choices here, it has to be B. When money is being requested for a cause, clarity matters. And I believe, too, this is in the passage word for word. And I did have it pre-highlighted already. The central lesson is not that all charity advertising is deceptive or that donors should distrust every simple message. Rather, the case illustrates a narrower and more useful principle. All right, here it is. When money is being requested for a cause, clarity matters. Word for word, guys. Question 4, I'm going to choose B. And there you go. Main idea. So what is the topic that keeps appearing in this passage, right? How can you summarize this passage in a few sentences? And in this case, one sentence. When money is being requested for a cause, clarity does matter. All right, next question. The passage is organized primarily by A, comparing several unrelated charities and ranking them by how clearly they advertise their missions. No, because we only talked about Cars for Kids. We did briefly touch on how competition works among charities, but we didn't talk about this. So let's go ahead and go on to B. Describing the history of vehicle donations before explaining how car donation programs are funded. Nope. Nowhere do I remember anything of this sort. And then we have listing the financial details of Cars for Kids before arguing that all charity advertising should be banned. And no. One, I don't remember the financial details of Cars for Kids. And I'm just going to rule that one out. And then that leaves us with D, introducing a legal dispute, explaining the missing information at issue, presenting both the charity's response and the court's reasoning, and ending with a broader lesson about clarity in charitable advertising. And this one right here, the longest answer choice, it is the answer choice that I will go with. And this is a passage organization question. And the question is asking, how is this passage built? And D clearly states how this passage is built, right? It flows, right? It introduced the legal dispute in the first paragraph. It explained The missing information at issue, right? Because Cars for Kids omitted information. It presented both the charity's response as well as the court's reasoning. And then we have at the very end, the broader lesson about the clarity in charitable advertising, right? They talk about it at the very end in the last few paragraphs. So yes, D is the correct answer here, right? We have to zoom out and see how everything is structured in order to answer this question. So there you go. I'm going to choose D. And D is the correct answer. All right. Question number 6. Which detail from the passage best shows why donors may have misunderstood the charity's mission? A. The donor's vehicle was described as non-working and not financially large. No, this is not the reason. However, this is in the passage in the very beginning, in the first page, right? His donation was not financially large, but the court treated the issue as larger than the value of a single vehicle. And this is saying best shows why donors may have misunderstood the charity's mission. And this is not. This part is just a little part of the person who was from Orange County and made the dispute, right? It's not going to be answer choice A. And then we go on to B. The organization stated that its website made its identity. My gosh, I can't pronounce that word. The organization stated that its website made its identity and mission clear. And no. Well, this is saying that shows why donors may have misunderstood the charity's mission. And again, this has nothing to do with the first part of showing why, right? This is showing why for a different reason, or like this would answer a different question. And we're going to say that this is incorrect. The court issued an injunction after reviewing the advertisement. And no, this is an action that happened after reviewing the advertisement. It's not showing why donors may have misunderstood the charity's mission. And then we have D here. The advertisements use children, a memorable phone number, and a general appeal to charity. And yes, I would say D is the correct answer here. And yes, it shows why donors may have misunderstood the charity's mission. And I just feel like I'm a broken record rereading this. But yes, I would misunderstand the charity's mission if I were seeing children playing the guitar and saying a catchy jingle and giving me a phone number to memorize. And I would, the mission that I got from that commercial, if you remember that commercial, was that my car would be going to underprivileged kids, not to other charities that have other motives, right? So I would choose D. And this type of question is a direct example, evidence question. And the question is asking, which detail from the passage best supports this idea? So that's why I kept repeating, right? I kept repeating the question because I'm trying to figure out what best supports this idea. And in this case, it is D, right? So this is what you're going to be doing on the test. You're gonna go ahead and repeat this question in your head. Why donors may have misunderstood the charity's mission? You're gonna read this and then answer it against this, right? And you're just gonna keep going and repeating. So again, this is my thought process, and that's why it may sound weird. It sounds weird to me, at least, saying it out loud. So D is the answer choice I am going with. And D is the correct answer. Question number 7. The author's primary purpose in the passage is to, and this is a primary purpose question. So again, this is, we are looking at the passage as a whole, right? And usually the purpose of the passage, it's usually in the beginning of the passage or near the end, right? Like in conclusion. So let's go ahead and read the answer choices. Persuade readers that all charity advertisements should be banned from radio and television. No, that is not the primary purpose, okay? That just sounds wrong. Explain how a charity advertisement became the center of a legal dispute over missing information and donor understanding. And this right here. Did I mean to put misunderstanding and donor understanding? But I believe this one right here is the correct answer choice. And let's just go ahead and read the other ones. Argue that donors should never support organizations with religious affiliations. No, the author's primary purpose was not this. Okay? It even said it word for word in the passage that was not its purpose for the passage. And lastly, we have described the history of vehicle donation charities in California. And no, this passage was not about the history of vehicle donation charities in California. So I will go with B here. And why I choose B is because we learned about the dispute between Cars for Kids and it airing in California. And why missing information, right, omitted information swayed or could sway donors to not donate, right? So I would go with B, answer choice B. And that is the correct answer. All right. Question number 8. As used in the passage, the word injunction most nearly means, these ones are my favorite because I pressed the wrong button. These are my favorite because this is just telling us, right? It's telling us, what does this mean, right? And I'm already at the part in the passage where they use the word injunction. And most likely, it's just going to be word for word. So let's go ahead and read the answer choices. A court order requiring a person or organization to do something or stop doing something. And there you go. That's the answer, right? Here it is. The judge issued an injunction, which is a court order. This is word for word, a court order requiring a person or organization to do something or stop doing something. So I'm just going to stop there, right? Because we don't need to. When you're taking the test, when you have it word for word and it's A, pick A and move forward. So let's go ahead and see what we have as the answer choice. And yes, it is A. And this is a vocabulary in context question. And the passage defines it directly. Again, which I love. Okay, last question. Based on the passage, which broader lesson can most reasonably be drawn about public messages that ask for donations? So this one, again, we have to zoom out, right? This is asking for like another main idea. This is what they call a broader implication question. So let's go ahead and read the answer choices here. Donors should assume that every short charity advertisement is intentionally deceptive. And no, this is not the answer choice. Okay? Because that's not the message they're trying to portray. A charity's mission is unimportant as long as the advertisement is memorable. And no, this is not it. Okay? We know that's not it because the argument here is that the charity gave exactly that the advertisement is memorable, therefore people will donate. However, the sneaky thing was that Cars for Kids was omitting information. So no, right here, no. The charity's mission is important though, okay? It was just left out. And that's why they put that part here about other charitable organizations, because that money that went to Cars for Kids could have went to other organizations that people would align with, because not everyone would align with the mission of Cars for Kids. All right. I'm not saying the mission is unimportant. I'm saying some people would not align with that mission. And again, that was omitted from donors. And in this case, that person from Orange County. Okay, moving on. Donors should pay attention not only to what an advertisement emphasizes, but also to what it leaves unstated. All right, this sounds great right here. So I'm going to take out B and I'm going to take out A, and I have a 50-50 chance of picking the right answer. And let's just read D. Charities should avoid using simple messages because simple messages are always illegal. And that just sounds wrong. It is not illegal to use simple messages. Omitting information is illegal, or it could be illegal. I don't want to say it is illegal, but it's sneaky, right? But it is completely legal as long as maybe you leave a disclosure of some sort. But in this case, Cars for Kids failed to provide a disclosure. But I digress there, and C sounds like the most supported answer, okay? Because it's implied that that's what we learned in the passage, that we should pay attention. Donors should pay attention because there could be information that is unstated, that is unsaid, or, and in this case, omitted, right? So I would choose answer choice C. And C is the correct answer. All right, we are done with the reading comprehension portion for the IBEW aptitude test for practice passage number 2. Now, this passage was difficult. This is not your usual read. I don't expect people to be reading news articles, right? Because that's what this is. These are just a compilation of news articles, and then all I did was summarize it to create a passage. And you need to read. You need to be able to identify what's going on in these passages and in your daily reading. When you're reading anything, all right? Even read those disclosures when you're updating your iOS on your iPhone. Read that disclosure. It's going to take you like 30 minutes and you won't understand any of it. But at least your brain will be able to recognize what's going on, even though you don't understand it at the moment. But if you keep reading, if you keep doing more reps, right? Working on your reps, then it will all make sense. It will all click. There you have it, guys. Make sure you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed. And tell me what your thoughts are on this passage. If it was hard, if it was medium, if it was easy. And just let me know if you want me to create another passage, because, guys, I am working on trying to deliver as much content as I can. So just be patient with me as I release content, because yeah, the main goal is to just have a whole library of free content and up-to-date content for you guys. And that's how I see my channel. I see my channel as the one-stop shop for you to get all the material that you will need to pass your IBEW aptitude tests, and in the future, any test that require you to pay for anything, because the mission is to just destroy the paywall. You don't need to be paying for any of this. All this could be free, and I'm going to make it free. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you. Bye. Oh, check out my gaming stuff.